Hello, hi friends, and good day once again. Welcome to the Financial Literacy. It is brought to you by the Financial Literacy Foundation in partnership with Mana Tabernacle of Witness and under the leadership of our senior pastor, Pastor Joylene, and our general overseer, Pastor Strike, whom I'm rising on their shoulders today. And thanks very much and big ups to what they are doing to get us to broadcast in important matters like this and all the other matters that we do throughout the week. Thank you, friends. And last week we spoke about the 7 laws of money, and particularly last week we were focused specifically on rule number 3, which is giving. We said give some away, and you may be surprised as to we titled the message as investing and investing right, and we were talking about giving. Let me tell you, giving is part of investing, because giving to the poor is lending to the Lord, and lending is investing. Go and check Proverbs 19 verse 17 and you will find that lending to the Lord, it's one of the best investment that we can do. And today we want to focus once more on one of the 7 rules of money, which is investing. And we say investing and investing right, and investing to get results out of our investment. And to start up with this topic, let us differentiate between investing and saving. What is the difference? Is there any difference? Yes, there is a difference between saving and investing. You cannot run before you walk. You cannot run before you do some warm-ups. And saving, I consider it as one of the first things that need to be done in order to put your investing as a balance. You need both, because you need a balanced financial plan. In order for you to be able to invest properly, you need to have a proper financial plan in place. And what do we mean by having a proper financial plan in place? You need to be able to have all the other elements in place in order to be able to invest properly. You need to have your life insurance in place, things like life covers to cover your debts, and disability covers, and your dread disease covers. They need to be in place. You need to be able to have your retirement put in place. You need to have your short-term insurance put in place, because without having all of this, one little thing tricking into your finances, such as maybe a theft in the house, or maybe an accident with your car, may derail your financial plan. So when we talk of investing, the underlying fact is that you must have a proper and a balanced financial plan in place. Then you are in a position to talk investment. So what is one of those? We said life, short term, and so on and so on. So we start off maybe with the emergency fund. Why do we need emergency fund? Because financial storms will come. It's not whether they will come, but it's a question of when they come, because they will definitely come. And you need to be able to have your story in order to be able to put that in place. So a person's financial health is measured by his emergency fund. We have said this before. Your financial health is measured by your emergency fund. So what we are seeing today with COVID, for instance, where we are staying at home and not working, that is a proof that things may happen which may cause you not to earn as you used to. Things may happen where you may earn less than what you are normally accustomed to. And how do you go about to resolve some of such? We are 3 months down the line now with COVID. Some who haven't returned to work. Some our businesses haven't generated any income. How are you surviving? the best is to have an emergency fund. So those who have got good emergency fund in place, they are not worried today. They are not too concerned, except in the fact that yes, we need to get back to work. But as to what am I eating today, it is already covered by their emergency funds. Do you have your emergency fund in place? You must put your emergency fund in place. There are rules with regard to how do you put an emergency fund in place. Rule number 1 is that you must be able to cover your monthly expenses through your emergency fund. At least 3 to 6 times should be the value of your emergency fund. So if your monthly expenses are worth about 10,000 rand, you should have a minimum of 30,000 rand in your emergency fund. And a healthy one should be at the region of 6 times, which is 60,000. And if you don't have that, you have an assignment to do. You have a homework to take care of to build up your emergency fund in a level which we can be able to say you are financially healthy. Just to repeat, we said a financial health of a person or a family, it is measured by the value of their emergency fund. And an emergency fund should be at the region of 3 to 6 times your monthly expenditure, and you should be able to build that up to be able to be financially healthy. This is not something that you put your money anywhere and everywhere else. This is not your investment, but this is your emergency fund. So in so saying, we are also saying that you don't simply put your emergency fund anywhere and everywhere. There are good products and a proper product where you should be putting your emergency fund into. Obviously, you can't put your emergency fund in your endowment. You can't put your emergency fund into your retirement annuity. You can't put your emergency fund, not even in a 32-day notice account with a bank. Why? Because a 32-day notice requires you to give notice in order to have access to the money. So, emergency fund must be a place or a vehicle where you will be able to put your money and be able to have access to it without serious challenges, without serious delays, without having to give a long notice. I will say 2 or 3 days is sufficient in order to be able to put your emergency fund. What product would we recommend for this? An access bond for those who have got mortgage bonds. Let us also say, not every mortgage bond is an access bond. So there are mortgage bonds or your home loans, which is an access bond. In other words, you are able to access what you have already put in. That will be the best place to put your emergency fund. We are talking about money market funds, where you can simply switch your money from the money market account into your check account or your savings account. We are talking about unit trust. Unit trust, we'll talk further about it today, but it is important to make sure that in a unit trust, we are talking about a fund where you will be able to access your money within 2 or 3 days. And any other thing similar to that, anything that will take you long or more days to access your money, it's not good enough for your emergency fund, because emergency, as the word says, you need to have quick access to the money. And emergency fund, you cannot put your money where you will be charged penalties in order to be able to withdraw some of those money to address your emergencies. So once more, we say emergency fund is a starting point in order to be able to have a balanced financial plan. I said you cannot run before you walk. So an emergency fund, it's a form of walking. It is a savings, not an investment. Why is this important? When you don't have an emergency fund, yet you have an investment, the day you're gonna have emergencies, maybe a tire burst, maybe your microwave needs changing, maybe your fridge broke down, and other related things that might require 1,000 rand or even more to be able to replace or fix. Those are emergencies. If you don't have an emergency fund yet you have an investment, you might find that the day you have an emergency, you are bound to disturb your investment. And investments usually are a longer term kind of a plan or facility. So you are disturbing those long-term kind of plans. So we need to be careful when it comes to where do we put our emergency. Just to recap once more, before we talk investing today, we said you need to have an emergency fund. And secondly, we said you need to have a balanced financial plan. And what is a balanced financial plan? You must make sure that you have a medical aid. This is not a program for the medical aid, but in medical emergencies are some of the things that will land us in unplanned deaths. So when you don't have an emergency fund, you may find yourself having to go for debts or applying for debts or credit where you had least expected. And again, we said you must have a short-term insurance for your assets, for your vehicle, for your building, for your contents at home. Your short-term insurance even covers you when you may happen to have your dog biting your neighbor. Your short-term insurance covers for that in the event where you are being sued. And I said you must also have a life insurance. This is for protecting of your income, family income. That is in terms of capital, in terms of income required at home. Because in the event of your death, we are talking about income must continue in your household. We are talking education needs, and we are talking estate expenses. Do you know that there is a lot of expenses that comes with dying? To deal with your estate in the event of death, it is expensive. You can be able to take care of that, and one of those things, it is through life insurance policies. You need to have your disability policy in place, both for your permanent disability and for your temporary disability. And you must have a provision for your dread disease expenses. So my friend, please take care of those. Now, when you have taken care of that, you are ready to invest. And what do we mean by this? We are talking about creating or building wealth. So you cannot create or build wealth before we take care of those important aspects. And what is to create or to build wealth? It comes with a number of things. One of the things that we need to know is that we need to be able to match our needs with the products that we need, we will be using. And what are those things that we need to take care of that deals with understanding the product or the vehicle that we use in order to build our wealth? There are 5 things. And number 1 is tax. Every financial services product has got a tax element in it. We need to be able to understand that the vehicle that I'm using, what type of tax will I be liable to pay? Whether it is myself directly as an investor or it is my fund on my behalf, it makes no difference, because at the end of the day, it is you who have contributed, so it is you who is actually paying the tax. Whether it's coming through the fund itself or it is coming through your pocket after you have received the money. These are some of the things that we're going to be looking at. And 2 of the most important taxes that we can look at there, it's income tax and capital gains tax, which I'll deal with that as we go on. Number 2 element when we consider vehicles for investment, it's liquidity. The liquidity on the investment deals with how easily am I able to access my money when I need it. Why is this important? You may plan to invest and all of a sudden you find that you have to change your strategy. It might be because of maybe income levels have changed. It may come because there is a better avenue to invest. But either way, investment strategy may change. On an annual basis, those who invest, we do a review on their investment, and there are two possible things. We may leave the investment strategy as it was last year, or we may change the strategy depending on the outcomes versus the expectations. So you need to be able to understand how liquid is my investment. Will I be penalized in order to be able to access my funds? Should there be a change in my strategy? Number 3 element to consider, it's risk. What is your risk tolerance? And what is your risk capacity? Two things: risk tolerance and risk capacity. Do you understand, my friend, what is your risk tolerance? Do you understand what is your risk capacity? How much are you willing to lose some of your capital or the amount you have invested? How much are you willing to gain? I know that we all want to gain as much as we can, but do you know that the level of gain that you are willing to receive correlate with the level of loss that you are willing to stomach? What is your risk tolerance and your risk capacity? I know that when I speak of risk, I've already pressed some bells. Something that risk, hey, I'm not willing to go on a risky thing. Let me say to you, risk is not a bad thing. So don't associate risk with bad. In investing, risk is something that we simply need to understand, and we simply need to relate it with the level in which I am willing to take risk and I am willing to stay under a particular level of risk. So risk is not necessarily a bad thing. Number 4 thing, it's cost. How much are you willing to pay in order to stay invested, in order to be able to put up your investment? And how much or what are the costs associated with that investment? What are the costs associated with making changes in my investment? Be it changing the contributions, be it making withdrawals if there is a need for that, be it any form of alterations in my investment. Do you know that there are some of the investments and we make changes which we consider regular and normal, yet we are getting charged? We are only surprised my investment has not been growing, and we don't know that we have been making so much changes and alterations which were eating up on my investment. What are the costs associated with my investment and my investment strategy? And the last element in the 5 factors, it's the time factor. Do you know that investment, it's so much related with time? We often have the statement, it is not when did you invest, it is not much on how much you have invested, it is not much about the timing of the investment, but it is the time that you have stayed invested. So the timing and the time are two separate things. The time we are relating to, I've put my capital or my investment amount on such a time, and I've stayed for you for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Because much of the returns that you get from investing, it's not much about the amount you have put in, but it is mostly about how long have you stayed invested. Do you know that time is an important factor in growing your money? We always say money as children. Do you know that it is always time that gives birth to the children and the grandchildren on your investment? These 5 elements are the most important things. Before we invest, let us be cautious in understanding what are the tax elements, what is the liquidity in my investment, what is the risk associated with the investment. Am I willing to take this risk? What are the costs associated with my investment? And lastly, what is the time that is required? I hear many people, particularly with regard to the time, we have put an investment plan which was meant for 5 years, and 6 months down the line, there is flu in an investment markets, and investors come back and say, I feel like my investment is not doing well. My friend, it is 6 months down the line. It is 1 year down the line. Is this associated, or is this important in relation to our expectations? I've just said one thing, expectations. So when we invest, we may invest the same amount, both of us. But what is our expectation? That goes with risk also. So someone might invest expecting a 10% return, and someone might invest expecting 15% return. When you say your investment hasn't done well, what do you mean? Are you the one who was expecting 10% and it made 9? Or are you the one who was expecting 15% and it made 7? Or you were expecting 15% and it made 13? Or you were expecting 10% and it made 12%? Do you see now that the language when we say the investment didn't do well has got to do with our expectations more than what the fund has returned? What is your risk and what is your time? I put these two together because they are very important to understand the behavior in our investing. So investment is more of a behavior than the actual figures that we see on paper. What is your behavior? What is your expectations? What was your time when you started the investment? Are you with me, friends? Are we still friends? I hope we are. Stay with me. We will learn more as we go on. Now, what is all this? What do we need to understand about this? It leads us to one conclusive matter. What is the vehicle am I using in order to invest? Have I chosen the right investment? Have I chosen the right investment vehicle? We may all want to achieve 15%, but did we all use the same vehicle? Did we all have the same expectations out of the investing? So someone might want a 15% return, but you find that they go and invest on a vehicle that can never be able to achieve 15%. And they come back after a year or after 5 years or even after 10 years and they say, my fund didn't do well. Were you on the right vehicle? That is the first question. Do you know? I know you have invested, some of you. Do you know what investment vehicle that you have put your money in? Do you know what is the expected return on the type of the vehicle that you have used? Now, we won't deal with all the different types of investment vehicles given the time. God be with us, we will be able to expand going forward. But I would like to look at one or two, if not three, common investment vehicles that we often use. Let us start. The first one, which is common to many of us, and that is what has been introduced to us by the industry, it's endowments. You find endowments in insurance companies, you find them almost everywhere. And we often have this type of a vehicle without a good understanding of what it is. An endowment, it's a product or a vehicle which is governed by the Long-Term Insurance Act. So I've just mentioned something here, the Act. It is important to understand that a vehicle or an investment platform, it's related to how that particular vehicle is governed. I'm referring to endowments now. Secondly, we'll talk about unit trusts. And unit trusts and endowments are not governed in the same way. So the rules of this type of products and services are different. Now, if this is governed by the Long-Term Insurance Act, it complies, or it has to conform with certain rules. And one of these rules is the Section 4 of the Long-Term Insurance Act. And one of the things, maybe two important things under the Long-Term Insurance Act, talks about how often can you have access to the money. And one of those is that you cannot have more than 2 accesses in the product in the first 5 years. You may be surprised, maybe one day you made a withdrawal and you come the second day to make a withdrawal, they give you that money, and you come the third day, maybe you had an emergency and they say, no, we cannot give you the money. You have to wait for another 5 years, or you have to wait for another 3 years, and you wonder, but I have money there. How does it come that they don't give me the money? Let me tell you why. The rules. They are not being funny or anything, but the rules. And the institution where I've put my money does not determine the rules. They have to comply with the rules. The rule says you cannot have more than 2 accesses in that particular fund. And the second rule is that you cannot increase your contribution or reduce your contribution by more than 20%. And when you violate these rules, you find that if you were 2 years down the line in the investment, the 2 years are added up. If you had a 5-year investment plan, the 2 years are added beyond the 5 years. So in other words, your investment is going to be 5 years long. If you had a 10-year, your 2 years will be added to be 12 years. Do we understand these rules? And the second thing in terms of the rules is that of the taxation. We said number one element is tax that we consider. Do you know that that product is taxed? And the tax, even though it comes from the fund directly with regard to endowments, it is you who pays it. Because if I have your money with me and someone says, you owe me the money and I must pay on your behalf, I will release the funds. But it is you who's paying at the end of the day, not the holder of the money. So the endowment pays tax based on the 5-fund approach. And this is not your cheapest form in terms of tax, but it is among the most expensive. So we need to consider the fact that when we invest, we must consider what is my tax bracket or what is my tax basis. If you are among the lower tax brackets, shy away from endowments because they are not the cheapest. Endowments are ideal for a high tax earner because there is a fixed level of 30% of the tax. So if you are paying tax on an 18%, don't play around endowments because they are not the best. But for someone who's beyond 30% in terms of tax, it may be the ideal investment. Let me finally talk about the bank product, which is your notice deposit, 32-day call accounts, and so on and so on. And I want to link this with your emergency fund. Don't put your emergency fund in a 32-day notice, given that you need to have 32 days to give notice in order to access. What happens when you don't give the notice? You get charged to access the money. So let us bear in mind that whatever vehicle that we use in order to invest has got a lot to do with of the investment. Now, let us consider the fact that our investment must have a strategy. We invest, but we don't get good results. Why? Because we don't have a strategy. We invest, but we don't do well. Why? Because we use a wrong product or a wrong vehicle. Let us be mindful in the fact that right vehicle need to be put in the right strategy. So to be able to win in these things, we don't have all the strategies. We don't know all the strategies. We don't know all the different costs and expenses relating to investment. We need to get closer to the people who know that. Financial planners, and in particular independent financial planners, can be very useful in our strategy of investing and investing right and get results. Now, as I conclude, COVID work, what we refer to as homework, I want to challenge you today that, do you have an emergency fund? Listen to me, my friend. You cannot invest before you have an emergency fund. It won't work. One day emergency will come. Pastor Strike shared with us and says, if you are not in the storm, you've just come out of the storm, or you are heading to the storm. I'm now talking about the financial storms. They will come, my friend. Even if you come from one, another one is along the way. So you cannot invest before you have an emergency fund. 3 to 6 times your monthly expenses should be your emergency. Go and sit down and review your monthly expenses in order to be able to determine how much should be my emergency fund worth. And number 2, which is the last in my homework, COVID work, determine, do you have a strategy on your current investments? And if not, relook at your investment. Are you investing in the right product? Go and check. Look into it. It's not too late to make alterations. Go and check, what are my tax elements? How much tax am I paying? How much tax could I be saving in order to be able to invest and invest right? And believe you me, with a good strategy, you are on your way to winning. And lastly, as a statement, I want to say, it is godly to create wealth. It is him, in any case, who said he will teach us how to create wealth. But he also said that he gives us the power also because he is standing by his word. It's a covenant. You don't have to do anything except sticking to the principles and the laws. But he said, as an heir of Abraham, you stand a chance to create wealth and build wealth. What is your path? Have you created your path in order to be able to stand and benefit out of God's given yes and amen word, which we need to stand by? You don't have to fuss around this. You just have to believe and start acting. James said, you pray and you don't get what you pray for because you are not putting it in the right way. What is your right way of investing? You don't say what you are looking for. What is your cry when it comes to investing? You can do it, and it is in your hands. Remember, you are a steward. You are managing God's money, and God cares about your investment. I want to thank you very much for touching base with us. Please feel free to come to us. You have your numbers on the screen. Talk to us. We will assist where we can. But the power is in your hands, and you can do it right. I thank you very much, and be blessed in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.